Well, if anything, the DeepSeek disruption that we had to start the week proved that there is life in AI beyond the Mag 7, which is something our next guest has been thinking a lot about to start the year. So with a view on where to invest in the second wave of AI, a warm welcome to Mark Gardner from MPC Markets.
Hi, how you doing?
Hello, really well. Mark, we've talked about it many times. AI is a paradigm shift, safe to say.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to me that it will continue to evolve as a whole, correct?
And probably evolve faster than any technology in the past. So we were lucky enough, obviously, with DeepSeek coming out this week, and Alibaba overnight actually as well, with a similar low-cost model, sort of shaking up the industry, because we were thinking that that was going to come, and we picked this topic, about 4 weeks ago. So a lot of things we were thinking have really come to the fore, because with those lower cost models, it really does lower the barrier to entry now for a lot of companies. We obviously saw some initial selling in the data centers. We think it'll have the opposite effect with lowering that barrier to entry. Now it's not just available to the Mag 7 and those with the massive pots of cash. We'll start to see more medium and potentially even more small enterprises be able to have access. So I think that demand will shift to the high side.
And that's what we're calling the second wave of AI, where it's not just training the models, it's not just coming up with the systems, it's putting it into practical application. Can we think of it like that as investors?
Yeah, absolutely. There's generally 4 phases with technology cycles. Infrastructure, which which you would count NVIDIA and the data centers in that phase. 2 is base services, and that's where companies will generally, and you can understand from a C-suite standpoint, whereby the easy wins or the sure bets on capex with productivity, because you can control it. You're not rolling the dice on a potential app or bit of software that may flop. So, and the next phase is social, where it goes out, where these agents that they're starting to talk about now will go out to the general public. And obviously the last phase is sort of more breakthrough. And as we saw with the tech, the internet boom basically in the early 2000s, I think about 3 to 4 trillion, and if you include the uplift that Microsoft and Apple and those guys had, and Google had, 3 to 4, maybe even up to 5 trillion of the market cap. And the Dow's, keeping in mind the Dow's only 19.5 trillion, were all founded after 2000, after the tech bubble burst, 2003 through 2010, 2011. So trying to be predictive in that breakthrough and that social end where it goes out to the consumers, it's not a fool's errand, but you're going to have to get lucky, because there's a lot of these companies may not even exist yet, and because the infrastructure hasn't been there for them to toy around with it. And the beauty of the lower cost models is like Bill Gates and like Steve Jobs. Now we have a model where someone in a garage can come up with an app, and that's where generally these big breakthrough models come through. So yeah, but the next phase really for high conviction in 2025 is more about where the money's going to be spent, and we do believe it'll be in that business productivity and efficiency, because businesses will take those easy wins first and direct their spending, while they obviously there's a massive gap in training staff up to be able to utilise AI. I think there's anywhere up to 500,000 available jobs in the sector in the US at the moment, just because there's a lack of skills. But yeah, so we've got 2 stocks in particular, Autodesk and ServiceNow, which are very much about efficiency and business productivity, and around about 55% of the savings or addition to GDP will come from labour productivity out of AI. It's suspected up until about 2030. Okay,
you kind of glossed over those, so let's start with Autodesk. Give us your 60-second description of what Autodesk does.
Essentially, they will provide you with the toolbox to automate workflows from anywhere from legals, compliance, HR, customer interactions. Construction. Well, Autodesk is also in construction as well. But essentially, even when they've rolled that out internally, and it saved them something like 21,000 hours in the first year, 14%, reduced their ticket time with their customers by 45 minutes. And obviously then humans won't get displaced from their jobs, they'll just generally move up to high level tasks and the more difficult problems, because we're not at that stage yet where the AGI stage where they're human-like and can do creative thinking. But obviously, ServiceNow will essentially roll out a lot of those things for you, similar to what Technology One does on a bit of a
So we're
linear
talking
level.
about ServiceNow now.
Oh, ServiceNow, yeah, sorry. Autodesk is an engineering company and they've gone into construction as well, but there was estimated about 1.8 trillion in waste in 2021 in the construction industry in the US. So they're doing end-to-end solutions now where from architect down to builder, all your material supply chain will actively be managed by the AI. So for instance, if lumber prices like they did a few years ago went up by 300%, it can start ordering steel on the supply chain and then communicating with the builder, obviously reducing waste there as well. They've worked with Airbus as well to reduce weight within the planes. With unique engineering jobs and the ability for it to be able to iterate up to 10,000 designs in an hour and come up with some pretty unique and kooky looking designs. But obviously a lot of them are structurally more sound and they're lighter, which is obviously then gives them a saving in fuel costs, etc. So it really is those companies where, from a C-suite point of view, it's a really easy bet basically if you're going to save money.
Yep. So Autodesk, speaking of money, isn't that awfully expensive to be a high conviction pick for 2025?
ServiceNow is a little bit more expensive. Autodesk is a little bit cheaper, but a little bit more conservative and a touch more risk because they've only just rolled out the construction platform. But both of them will see their addressable markets are basically doubling at pretty quick rates. And obviously with DeepSeek and Alibaba, and we will start to see some cost reduction come down, and with Trump obviously announcing all of the funding or the initial 100 billion and then another 500 billion in training, etc. I think we'll start to see these two companies in particular are already doing this and have been doing this in the space for nearly a decade. Now they've got the compute power, but now that compute power is accessible to a much broader client base. So realistically, they were expensive when I probably did the stats a week ago, but I think their addressable market probably just popped by about 100% in about the last week, I would imagine, as more and more companies who thought they were priced out of that market, that AI market, and were probably going to wait, will now actually go, well, why not us?
So there you go. For all of you who've been writing in and asking about international stocks, there's two for you, Autodesk and ServiceNow, to take advantage of the second wave of AI, which is a high conviction idea coming from the team at MPC Markets. But that brings me to my next point. We don't have a lot of AI classic or clean, I should say, AI exposure on the ASX. So when we're thinking about locally listed companies, do we get back to the sort of picks and shovels conversation?
We've gone for picks and shovels just on the basis of that infrastructure phase is not quite over yet. We are going to have a lot of data center build. It's going to need a lot of power and it's going to need wiring. BHP, which seems like a very odd AI pick, but they're we see a supply gap coming in copper. They're sitting on the largest discovered uranium deposit in the world at Olympic Dam, which they can go into serious production at any time. I think they're going to benefit in the near term. But funnily enough, if you Google AI ASX stocks, there's a lot of candidates for companies that will likely get that aren't really AI, that will probably be replaced by AI. The image diffuser technology in AI really does make Appen defunct because there's no need. The AI can now tag things. But companies like WiseTech could potentially either be overtaken or they could actually adapt it very quickly and broaden their business model. It just depends on how quickly they work. But BHP is even involved with Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates funded company which uses Google Maps to discover critical minerals. And they've made a major discovery called cobalt. So they've actually made some serious AI investment. You'd be surprised at the amount of investment that these big mining companies have put in.
Yeah, we don't talk about that a lot. So Cobalt Metals came from this investment into an entity, just to clarify, that Bezos and who'd you say?
Bill Gates was also
are in
involved
as well. So this is using Google Maps to find these mineral deposits?
Yeah, and they've successfully found a very large copper deposit in Africa in the last 18 months. So they also use, obviously, for productivity, for machine maintenance, etc., because one of the things that Autodesk does as well is predictive maintenance. So they run digital twins, whereby, so for jet engines, for instance, can be they can predict basically wear and tear, and then basically say if you don't spend X amount of money now, it's going to cost you X amount of money in the future. So that reduces costs. And those digital twins as well are very useful in biotech industry. It'll really lower the barrier for biotechs now, because they don't need to go and find base patients. They can have a digital twin in the system and run experiments. And now that the proteins have all been mapped by AlphaFlow, essentially they can run digital experiments without having to do them physically in the laboratories.
Okay, we're getting, maybe for our viewership, a little bit
Yeah.
bogged down in AI, but I think the point is when we have reporting season knocking on our door, we really want to find out how these companies are planning to or already using AI. That would be
Yeah.
a key question for
Absolutely,
investors, I think,
yeah.
as well. And then the other point, I think, is that it's not going anywhere. You sound like you've done, real deep dive. There's so many
Yeah.
people who are all of a sudden AI experts, but as an investor, this is just something you can't ignore.
Oh, absolutely, you can't ignore. And look, and whilst the initial winners at the moment, we saw a very similar situation with Cisco and O1, where the company goes up, the market gets ahead of itself, potentially. Same thing happening in Nvidia or Microsoft at the moment, but that next phase is hard to predict. But if from a safety standpoint, this is traditionally where, even in the Industrial Revolution, the internet boom, is that business productivity spend is definitely in the next phase, and then the companies that take advantage of that and roll that out the quickest will be usually the winners over the next 2 to 3 years.